As we work our way through, pay close attention to the last 3 or 4 segments of this part of the YouTube and regarding the Dominican history, because as it serves true, recent history is the most important history. And America did have 2 occupations in the Dominican Republic, the first of which took place in 1916 and ran for approximately 9 years through the end of 1924. The Marines landed in Santo Domingo on May 15, 1916. Prior to their landing, though, Jimenez resigned. He was in charge running in the country at that time, and he refused to, as it translates, I'll translate it to English, he refused to be in an office regained with foreign bullets, is the best way I can translate it to English. On June 1st, the Marines occupied 2 towns, Montecristi and Puerto Plata, and after a brief campaign, took the stronghold Santiago by the beginning of July. The Dominican Congress did elect a gentleman named Dr. Francisco Enriquez as president, but in November, after he refused to meet with U.S. demands by President Woodrow Wilson, who was in power at the time, announced the imposition of a U.S. military government. The American military government did implement many of the institutional reforms carried out in the United States today during this period they called the Progressive Era. Well, if you're hearing our chickens in the background, that's just the way it goes here. I think one of them's laying an egg right now. Anyway, continuing on, it included such things as a reorganization of a national tax system, an expansion of the primary education system throughout the nation, the creation of a nationwide police force to unify the country, and the construction of national system consisting of major roads throughout the nation, including a major highway linking Santiago, the second largest city, to the capital, the first largest city, Santo Domingo. Coincidentally, this highway is called Duarte, and Juan Pablo Duarte, just like I said, that name is going to appear all over the country. Despite these reforms, though, virtually all Dominicans resented the loss of their sovereignty to foreigners. And they resented it for reasons of, few of them even spoke a word of Spanish. Nobody really cared about any real concern of the nation's welfare. And basically it was just a power regime. Okay, I'm going to proceed now into the era of Trujillo, because after that, the second invasion took place, and I think this is of particular importance to our American friends, okay? Because there's a lot of respect that was gained in the mid-60s because of what America had done, and very few Americans are even aware of it. Around 1927 through 1961, they called this time frame the era of Trujillo. Trujillo established absolute political control, much the same as a dictator, while promoting economic development, of course, as with all dictators, which mainly he and his supporters benefited from. He did exercise severe repression of the Dominican human rights. Trujillo treated his political party, called El Partido Dominicano, in English, the Dominican Party. It's kind of like a rubber stamp party for his decisions. The true source of his power was from the Guardia Nacional, which is a National Guard, much larger, better armed, and more centrally controlled than any military force in the Dominican nation's history before it. By disbanding the regional militias and Marines, eliminating the main power source of potential opposition, it gave the Guard a virtual monopoly on power. By 1940, Dominican military spending was an astonishing 21% of the national budget. At the same time, he developed an elaborate system of espionage agencies, like spying agencies, people spying on people, much the same as what is going on in many of the Western nations and European nations now. This ran till late in the 1950s. There were at least 7 categories of intelligence agencies spying on each other as well as the public at that time. Sound familiar, I bet. to a lot of our people out in Western nations right now. All of the citizens of the nation were all required to carry out various identification cards and, believe it or not, good conduct passes to protect them when they were stopped by the secret police and asked for their papers, if you will. And it was nothing short of I can't really say totalitarian, but just one step under it. And this led the way for the second United States occupation. And I want to continue with that because it's quite important. From 65 through 66, in 1965, actually April 16th, enough dissatisfaction generated another military rebellion. Again, Trujillo was much as a dictator. He was not really a president by any stretch of the word. That rebellion commenced on April 24th, 1965. The insurgents, reformist officers, and civilian combatants called themselves the Constitutionalists. On April 28th, these Constitutionalists requested help from the U.S. military and asked for an intervention, and the U.S. forces landed, ostensibly to protect U.S. citizens and to evacuate U.S. citizens and other foreign nationals. U.S. President Johnson at the time, convinced of the defeat of the Loyalist forces and fearing the creation of a second Cuba on the American doorstep, ordered U.S. forces to restore order in the country. Johnson was not about to stand for a second totalitarian system like Cuba so close to the American border. In what was initially known as the Operation Power Pack in U.S. history, ultimately 23,000 U.S. troops were ordered to the D.R. To this day, many Dominicans, and I want you to pay attention to this, folks, to this day, many Dominicans respect the fact that if America didn't come to their aid, they would be living under a totalitarian Castro-type regime. Very important that you understand what I just said. American listeners pay close attention to that because the generation here that is in their 60s and 70-year-old range, they are very, very respected of what America did for their country. Right now, this is a solid, totally democratic government, and things are running exceptionally smooth due to that invasion by 1965. And you see, our chickens seem to agree with us. There's one or two at the front door right now. Following that, there was a brief period from 78 through 1986 called Guzman/Blanco, white. Again, Guzman is the law firm that we use for immigration and all of our closings and what have you. A very prominent family name since the beginning of this country, and both actively in terms of business, politics, just a very well-respected family. Anyway, Guzman's inauguration on August 16th marked the country's first peaceful transfer of power from one freely elected president to another. By the late 1970s, economic expansion slowed considerably because if you look back at history, you'll find the sugar prices just dove down and oil started rising substantially. Sugar is one of our biggest exports, and as of course, even though we have a lot of oil here and natural gas, we do import it from Venezuela, which is a key note. Many people relocating here and coming to visit when we explain about this, that's a stronghold by the way things are looking today, especially out in the Mideast in the Straits of Hormuz and the frictional zones all around the Mideast. I'd much rather have oil coming from Venezuela just a short distance than if anything radical was to happen, such as the Straits of Hormuz or a war breaking out in Israel, Syria, any of the other, Iran, any of those other nations. Something you might want to think about, because it was on our cut and no cut list, which did, favor positively on us relocating here many years ago. Anyway, rising inflation and unemployment diminished support for the government. It did help trigger a massive wave of immigration from the DR to the U.S., and they ended up settling in parts of New York, New Jersey, specifically the Patterson area, Philadelphia, Boston, and as well, it triggered a similar migration of Puerto Rican people in the preceding decades as well that headed up towards the States. And it was due to crops that were diminishing in value and oil was surging. So these good folks were looking for opportunities. And although that's opposite now, more people are actually leaving the Western nation than are coming there. I don't think mainstream media is painting an accurate picture of that. But if you dig deep enough, you'll find the facts are what they are, and you'll find more people are actually leaving the Western nations and returning to their home.